Welcome back to another lesson, everybody, and today we're talking about the HbA1c test and its relevance to you. Now, this is going to be one of the cornerstones of your diabetes care because it tells us how the disease is progressing and, generally speaking, what your risk of complications might be further down the line. So if you're not familiar with it, just allow me to explain what the HbA1c test is. It is a 3-month average of your blood glucose levels. HB literally means blood and A1C means glucose essentially. So we're looking at blood glucose with an average of over 3 months. And the reason we're able to do this is because as your red blood cells are circulating in your body, they start to pick up things like glucose. So glucose is literally sticky, so it will stick to the red blood cells. And red blood cells last approximately 3 months in your body before they are recycled and new cells are produced. So we're able to test those red blood cells and assess how much glucose is stuck to them, and that gives us a HbA1c test and gives us an overall idea of how much glucose has been circulating in your body during that period. And as you can see, the two pictures here, the more glucose that sticks to the red blood cell, the higher your glucose levels will be. And the more glucose that sticks to these, then as I say, the higher the glucose levels will be, which will increase your risk of complications. And really, one of the biggest risks is cardiovascular problems, because if you think of these molecules traveling through your blood vessels, this one here compared to this one has a much greater chance of getting stuck and in causing injury to the blood vessels, which then impacts your cardiovascular health. But glucose literally gets everywhere, so it can also impact the kidneys, the eyes, the nerves, amongst many other things. So it really can have a big impact, which is why we're very keen to try and keep HbA1c targets within ideal numbers. So hopefully that explains what it is. So what are we looking for in terms of control? The HbA1c test, like I say, will be a blood test. It's different from the general day-to-day finger prick test that you might do in a GP surgery or if you're testing at home. This test is the here and now. It is different figures, but it will be related to the HbA1c test. So if you have consistently high finger prick tests, you will likely have a high HbA1c test and vice versa, but the numbers are different. So you might see something like on the finger prick somewhere between 4 and ideally not, but up to 27.7 and above. Whereas the HbA1c test uses millimoles per mole. The finger prick uses millimoles per litre, so it's a different measure. And millimoles per mole will look more like this. Numbers in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. We used to express this as a percentage. So if you've had type 2 diabetes a while, you might be familiar with things like 5%, 6%, 7%, 8%. Those figures are now gone, and we are working in millimoles per mole. So let me just explain the ranges. If you have a HbA1c test and it is below 42, it means you have normal glucose levels. You do not have any type of diabetes. If it's 42 to 47, this is what we'd consider pre-diabetes. You haven't got it yet, but you're on your way. Blood glucose or HbA1c test of 48 to 59, this is diabetes, type 2 diabetes. We diagnose it at 48 millimoles per mole, but we consider this gold standard good control. And the reason is if you can keep your blood glucose levels in this range, you don't really have any increased risk of developing complications due to your diabetes compared to the normal population. But of course, as this number starts to rise, so it might go above 59 millimoles per mole, then you have an increased risk of complications. And this number can just keep increasing. So I think the highest I've ever seen is 215 millimoles per mole. And those types of patients generally see some complications, and everywhere in between. So ideally, between lifestyle and optimal medication, we're trying to keep the numbers as close to this as possible. And for some patients, they may be even able to drive it lower. And we will also do a video on remission, which means your HbA1c is below 48 or even 42 millimoles per mole, and you aren't taking any medication. So watch out for that video later in the course. Hopefully that gives you some information about HbA1c. Like I say, this should be at least a yearly test. You may have practice nurses or GPs that are keen to do it more often, in which case I would encourage you to do so. But because it's a 3-month test, you don't want to do it any more regularly than 3 months to give those blood cells a chance to recycle. So that's it for today, and we'll see you at the next lesson.